on today that I thought might be helpful for a few of you. I'm pulling the distributor out of a 2001 GMC pickup right now. And in order to do this, what you want to do before you pull the distributor, and I'll show you here, is you... Alright guys, so I'm up close and personal with our distributor now. You can see we've got a tab, so to speak, or a bump out little triangle. That's got an 8 on it. This vehicle I'm working on is a V6. If we come over here, we've got one with a 6 on it. So this is what I'm trying to turn the crankshaft to right now. There, the 6 comes up real nice. So if we turn the crankshaft, but I block all the light apparently, you will see that we can line up to that 6. Now go nice and slow on this, guys. You got to fight compression a little bit. I will say always turn clockwise. That way you don't run the risk of loosening up the bolt. So there we go. We should be... Alright, there we go, guys. We're lined up with that 6. Now let's take a look at the crankshaft. Now with our crankshaft, you can see the line on our harmonic balancer is almost lined up with the mark on the timing cover. I am going to take that and line it up perfectly just because, went a little too far. I guess I'll have to back it up. It doesn't take much. So the big important part is we know exactly where that distributor is at in relation to the rotor. So when we pull this distributor out, that rotor's going to spin, and we want to make sure when we drop it back in that everything's lined up properly. Next step in this process is to take out this 10mm bolt that's down here for our distributor hold down. I won't make you guys wait for all of this because, as you can see, you don't get much swing on the wrench. So hopefully, there it goes, it just got really loose. Hopefully, usually you get a rotation or so out of it, and then you can spin it out with your fingers. It definitely saves a bunch of time. Yeah, it's on its way out. Alright, so we've got our screw all the way out, and I'm going to pull this distributor up. So I'm going to pull it straight, but I want you to pay attention to the rotor. So it's got to be wiggled a little bit. There was a connector on the back side that's unplugged. See how that rotor turned? So when you go back together, you won't be lining your rotor up with the 6. You need to line your rotor up just an inch, 3/4 of an inch over. So take a picture of it, put a mark on it, whatever you want to do. Usually what I do is once I pull this out and I've got it on the bench, I'll throw a mark on it. So it's kind of a fight on these 4.3 liters to get them out of here. I may find that I take the air conditioning off, and you see it doesn't matter if I mark it now or not because I just turned the shaft. So thankfully I had a video of it. And then I dropped my phone. So you can see, hey guys, so you can see the distributor's out. I pulled the intake out, just 8 bolts, 4 on each side. The intake's yours at that point. The fuel lines in the back can kind of be a little bit of a fight to get in there and get them, but the struggle's worth it. You'll be able to get it. What I wanted to show you guys though was I put this rag in here. And if you look at all of the nasty junk that has fallen down when I've been cleaning, and I have been trying to clean very, very well, you don't want that stuff to go down into your lifter valley and make its way down into the oil pan. I've seen some people cause some damage by getting the oil pickup screen tube plugged up, and then they need a new engine. So, and again, over here on the intake, I cleaned the intake up very well. Still got to go over it with a little bit of brake cleaner. What I did want to point out was make sure you get these holes cleaned out well, guys. especially if you did have a coolant leak on these. You can see this one's still got some gunk in it. It was plugged all the way up. Do not break all this stuff loose though. Don't get crazy and try and scrape all that stuff off of the intake. Don't get crazy and try and scrape all of the stuff out of that lifter valley, because what you're gonna do is send debris flying when you put this thing back together. Be very gentle and clean only what you need to clean. Alright guys, I went through, cleaned all of our gasket surfaces repeatedly with brake cleaner. Now that I'm looking through the camera, I see I've got another spot that I still need to wipe with the rag over here to get it done. But now that my rag's out and I carefully removed it by folding the edges in, I still have some cleaning to do. So you can see down here, possibly, if the light hits it just right, there's some coolant in there. So I can catch coolant on both sides of the camera. What I do is I just take some engine oil and I go through and rinse that lifter valley down. Hopefully that catches some of the other stuff that I may have lost. Go ahead and squirt it in the number 3 cylinder too. That's always good for it. Or number 4 actually, sorry, I'm backwards. So this helps fill the lifters with a little bit of oil possibly, but mostly I want to rinse any coolant down that got in there or any debris before I throw this intake manifold back on. So let me clean up the mess that I made, finish this gasket surface one more time. Nothing wrong with being too clean. And then we're going to put our gaskets in and seal this intake manifold back down. So we're cleaned up one more time. This job certainly does not get any easier while trying to hold the camera. So I've got my silicone that came with my Velcro kit, and I just want to show you guys how I do this. I'm going to go up on the edge of this gasket surface slightly, and then I'm going to run a nice bead across the top of here. So make sure that you have everything clean and ready to go. You do not want to leave the silicone on there for very long before you assemble. Also, your bolts need to be clean and ready. Now, there's not a huge gap, and this would be nice if this all came out in one solid bead. There's not a huge gap between your gasket, or your intake, I'm sorry, and this lifter valley, but you need to make sure you have enough to cover it. So hopefully we can do a little bit better job on this front one, get a little better camera angle. And what I always do also, when I do my gaskets, when I put the gaskets on the side, I get a little more. So let me show you that in a bit. So my biggest tip to you guys would be don't hold your phone and try and do this at the same time. But once you get your gasket set in there and you had a little bit of sealer underneath of it, put a little bit of sealer on the top too. So this front gasket turned out looking kind of crappy. I'm trying not to video it for you, so I don't have to be embarrassed about it. But it will seal nonetheless. So just get a little bit in each corner. I had to grab a spare container that I had because I put way too much on the back. Biggest tip, don't try and videotape on your cell phone while trying to do this. Makes it a lot easier if you have two hands. Alright gang, next step is to torque everything down. I went over everything hand tight. Now I'm just going to 100 inch-pounds. And you can see I'm going in a pattern. I'm starting from the middle, working my way from the front to back, and working my way to the outside from the center. Now some people may say that my torque's inaccurate because I have an extension on here. Feel free to click on this video that I've got in this card and it will show you that that's a myth. We actually tested that and found it not to be true. Now I went through, made sure all of these were hand tight to begin with. Just snug them gently. Then I'm at 100 foot-pounds right now. Once I get these all torqued down, I'm going to set my wrench to 132 inch-pounds for my final torque. Just so you guys know, I did put GM pipe sealant on all of the bolts before I put them in there, so I'll put a link to that or something. I always recommend doing that. I believe GM called for that when I was working at the dealership. I know that's what I was always putting them at the dealership. Some people recommend blue Loctite. Blue Loctite's fine also, but I always use that. So now I went through, torqued everything down. I do want to stress this, guys, when you go through your torquing procedure, this bolt, that bolt, on and on and on, do your final torque, go over all of them again. You want to hit them all more than once on that final torque, because this thing is being sunk down every time you torque it down. So make sure before you're done, all of the bolts are no longer turning anymore and they're clicking at your 132 inch-pounds. So, and if you want to test to make sure and see if you put enough gasket material in there, if you were worried about that RTV, see it oozing out of there, that's how you know you've got enough. So as long as it's oozing out of that gasket, you're good. And you don't want too much to ooze out. You want it to ooze out just slightly. Oh, it's really hard to see that side, sorry. Because if you've got a ton oozing out of there, then that means you also have a ton of it oozing back into the engine block. So you do want to use that slightly sparingly. I will say I had to use more than that one tube that was provided. I had an extra one of those tubes floating around, so I actually ended up using a tube and a half. So just for reference. Hey, one other thing while we're talking about putting this intake manifold back in, I wish I could have got a shot of putting it in there. But when you put the intake manifold in, slide it back as far as possible before you start to drop it down. So I had to put this back in there. I've got the fuel lines back here. They're sitting in position when I put it in there. And then I lowered it down on an angle. You don't want to slide this thing back and wipe all of your gasket material off that you put on there. That RTV, if you slide this thing back, I've seen guys do that before. They catch their RTV in the back and they push it out the back, and then they've got a huge oil leak when they're done. I'm sure some of you are thinking, what's this round gasket that was floating around inside the box? Well, that's for the distributor. So make sure you get your distributor cleaned up nicely, put a new gasket on it. The old one's going to be all crusty and nasty and brittle. This actually will allow quite a bit of oil to pump out the backside of that intake if you don't have this gasket in there. Another thing you want to do while you're here is check this distributor gear teeth, guys. These ones look really good. They're nice and squared off yet. It has been known on some of these 5.7 liters. This one's a 4.3, so maybe it just doesn't get as brutalized for these gears to wear down quite a bit, and that will cause some intermittent misfire issues, especially on deceleration, as that backlash and that gear goes back and forth. So I'm going to get this thing lined back up the way it was when I pulled it out. That's my cylinder number 6, remember? And it had turned back about 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to drop this down in there like that. Hopefully I can capture that on video, and so you guys know what you're dealing with. Not only are you trying to line these splines up for these gear teeth, which is pretty simple, but the oil pump drive sits in the bottom of this distributor. So camshaft is turning the distributor here, and turn the camshaft gear on the distributor is spinning our oil pump. So we need to make sure that that flat spot lines up. Sometimes these end up a tooth off. I actually had one a tooth off yesterday that I was working on. and I just had to pull it and spin it a tooth. You can use a screwdriver to get in there if you want, or I always keep a second distributor laying around. This one is purely for priming engines when I rebuild them. That way I can prime the oil pump. I've got it set up for a drill, so this thing's filthy. It's been sitting on the bottom of my cart, but that will, with no gear on it, allow you to just turn the oil pump drive and get it lined up where you need it. All right, let's see what we can make happen with this distributor here, gang. Got it lined up with the hole. This one is on the side of the way. Got the distributor lined up where it needs to go. Oh, these 4.3s are kind of a pain. Got my rotor pointed where it needs to be. There you go. Down and in, just like that. And you can see, maybe, we are lined up with our tab right here. This was the tab for the 6-cylinder, and our rotor is pointing right to it. So that's exactly where we needed to be. Hey gang, that about wraps it up for the 5.7 liter, 4.3 liter intake tips and tricks that I have. So the rest of it's pretty cut and dry. Grab a Chilton's manual and you'll find everything you need to know. So right now I'm heading to town to pick up some parts for this transmission job, so there'll be another video on its way to you.